Hey guys, tonight we are traveling back to a world where even the air had teeth, to a night when the wind could flay the hide from your bones and still you would have to sleep in it. We're heading into the heart of the Great Plains, thousands of years before electric light, central heating, or even the word comfort meant anything close to what it means now. Before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, tell me where you're watching from and what the temperature is where you are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake into a darkness that feels carved out of stone. The air in your lungs burns as if it has edges. Outside, the temperature hovers somewhere around -40 degrees, though no one here bothers counting. Cold is not a number, it is a god. The wind prowls like an animal across the open plains, dragging loose snow into waves that rise and fall like a white sea. The tipi around you creaks softly, the sound of hide shifting against hide, poles flexing under the weight of frost. The fire at the center has died down to a red heartbeat, small but alive. You feel its faint heat reaching across the sleeping circle, brushing the edge of your blanket, a whisper that says you are not yet dead. The tipi smells of smoke, tanned hide and sage. It is a breathing house, alive in ways a modern home could never be. The poles are not cut at random. They are chosen from straight young pines, dried for seasons, polished smooth by hand. The hides that wrap them once belonged to buffalo, stitched together in a spiral seam that runs like a rib cage from ground to crown. Every fold, every tie, every flap obeys rules older than memory. The smoke hole at the top is not an accident. Its angle shifts with the wind, controlled by long cords that hang inside like the reins of an invisible animal. Open it too far, and the heat escapes. Close it too tightly, and you choke the family in smoke. Survival here is a negotiation measured in inches. The fire in the center is small on purpose. Flames must not lick too high, or the tipi will fill with smoke. The trick is to keep the wood low and slow burning, to let the heat travel sideways more than upward. You notice how the logs are arranged. Split cottonwood and birch placed in a half moon, each piece leaning toward the others like fingers around a bowl. It's deliberate engineering, a draft pattern that feeds oxygen to the coals while pushing smoke toward the back flap, where it rises and curls out through the vent. The people here know the color of survival by heart. Yellow flames mean waste. Red means perfect. The firekeeper, usually an elder, reads the light the way others might read weather. Your bed is nothing more than furs piled in layers, but every layer has meaning. Buffalo hides below, hair side down, trap heat against the frozen ground. Deer or elk hides above, fur side up, catch and hold the body's warmth. Between them is a hidden insulation, dried grass or cattail fluff packed thin like down. This creates a thermal pocket, a primitive yet perfect barrier that can keep a human body alive through temperatures that freeze the breath of horses outside. The family sleeps in a circle around the fire, heads inward, feet outward, like spokes on a wheel. The order is never random, infants and elders nearest the coals, adults forming the protective ring. Warmth radiates outward, but so does duty. Every placement is the difference between life and frostbite. You listen to the breathing of the others, slow, rhythmic, steady. Even that is part of the warmth. The tipi is a closed ecosystem of heat exchange. Every exhale adds moisture to the air, which in turn slightly insulates the space. Frost forms in faint patterns on the inner hides, glinting in the firelight like tiny constellations. In the morning, it will melt and darken the seams, the house quietly drinking its own breath. The structure is designed to manage this. Hides thick enough to trap heat, but porous enough to release excess moisture. If the air stayed sealed, you would suffocate. If it escaped too quickly, you would freeze. Somewhere between those two fates, people learned the art of living. The wind outside changes direction. a low moaning that crawls over the snow. The tipi responds like a living thing. The flap at the top shifts with the current, guided by the cords tied near the sleeping mat. Someone, half asleep, reaches up to adjust it, a practiced motion done without opening their eyes. The draft softens, smoke straightens. You realize the genius of it all. No walls, no doors, no nails, yet everything works in harmony, tuned to nature's logic rather than fighting it. The structure is portable, renewable, aerodynamic. It breathes in rhythm with the people inside. The fire pops once, sending sparks up through the vent, tiny stars rising into the void. You think about how fragile it looks. A few sticks, a ring of stones, a skin of hide, yet it has outlasted blizzards that could tear apart modern machines. The buffalo hides are stiff now, edges rimmed with frost, but they hold. You can feel the warmth gathering inside, pooling near the ground. The cold outside may be infinite, but inside this cone of fire and breath, there is order, ritual, and care. A dog shifts near the doorway, snuffling softly. It sleeps there deliberately, its body a barrier between the family and the wind that slips in under the flap. Even that choice is design. Everything has purpose. Every being contributes to the ecosystem of survival. The children are wrapped together under one shared blanket, their faces buried in fur, their dreams slow and heavy. The adults lie half awake, listening for the subtle signs, the whistle of wind, the crack of wood, the change in firelight that signals time to rise and feed the coals again. You think about how this knowledge was built, layer by layer through centuries of trial, failure, and memory. There are no written plans, no blueprints, only repetition until instinct replaces instruction. You do not learn to build a tipi by reading. You learn it by freezing once and never again. The structure before you is a map of collective intelligence, drawn not on paper but in smoke, hide, and the rhythm of surviving nights exactly like this one. Outside, the stars are so bright they hurt to look at. Each breath leaves your mouth in slow silver clouds. The plains stretch forever, a white horizon broken only by shadows of other tipis, each one a tiny ember in the frozen sea. You realize the scale of what this architecture accomplished. Entire communities survived here without metal, without glass, without electricity, using only the physics of wind, the chemistry of fire, and the discipline of craft passed through generations. The tipi doesn't just keep you alive, it teaches you balance. It demands awareness of every change in the environment. If the smoke bends east, the vent must be shifted west. If the hides stiffen, they must be thawed and stretched before they crack. The fire must be fed with precision. Too much wood, and it chokes. Too little, and the air grows brittle. Warmth here is an equation of constant attention. Comfort is vigilance disguised as peace. You close your eyes. The sound of the wind becomes distant, softened by hide and heartbeat. The fire hums. The air moves in circles from flame to breath, from breath to frost, from frost back to water. You begin to understand why. For generations, this way of living was not seen as primitive but as perfect. The tipi is not a shelter against nature. It is nature tamed by understanding. You drift to sleep to the faint hiss of snow against hide, knowing that every inch of the structure above you has earned its place. The cold presses close, but it cannot enter. Not tonight. You wake to the slow rhythm of the tipi's breath. The fire at the center has burned down to coals, low and red, pulsing like the heartbeat of the structure itself. Around you, the hides flex and sigh softly as the outside wind moves across them. The tipi is not a passive shelter. It lives, it adjusts, it exhales. Every gust of air, every shift in pressure, every change in temperature transforms it slightly. What you're sleeping in isn't just a dwelling. It's a perfect conversation between wood, hide, air, and fire. The tipi doesn't resist the cold. It learns to speak with it. The first sound you hear is the wind at the crown, whistling softly through the smoke hole. It is not random music. The angle of that hole is a masterclass in physics. You see how the top poles are arranged in a precise spiral, notched to form a narrow vent that aligns with the prevailing winds. Those winds pull the smoke upward, like an invisible hand lifting it away from the center fire. This balance between intake and exhaust is everything. Too little venting and smoke builds up, filling the tipi until eyes burn and throats close. Too much venting and the precious heat rushes out, stolen by the frozen air. Every adjustment to the flap changes this balance, and families learn to read the smoke like others read stars. A slow, lazy drift meant the fire was healthy. A whirling vortex meant danger, collapse, suffocation, or firestorm. The poles themselves, stripped and polished pine or spruce, are set in pairs. They lean inwards and cross near the apex. Their weight perfectly distributed. You notice that none of them creak too loudly, even in high wind. That's because each pole sits on a slightly hollowed base in the ground, cushioned with earth and bark for grip. This simple engineering distributes pressure evenly, preventing collapse. The hides that wrap them are stitched together in a spiral seam that follows the rotation of the poles. That spiral is not just for looks, it distributes tension evenly around the tipi, allowing wind to flow along it rather than against it. When the blizzard roars, the wind doesn't slam into a wall, it glides over the structure's curved skin, leaving only a gentle tremor. You crawl toward the entrance and lift the hide flap just slightly. The world outside is blinding white. Snow drifts rise almost to the waist of the tipi, sculpted smooth by wind. The temperature is still around -30 degrees Fahrenheit, the kind of cold that makes even your eyelashes stick together. You close the flap quickly, and the difference is instant. Inside, the air feels almost warm, though in truth it may only be 30 degrees above freezing. But warmth here isn't about comfort, it's about function. 32 degrees means survival, 40 means sleep, 50 means luxury. You move back toward the fire and begin the morning ritual. First, feed the coals with dried willow twigs, then a handful of shredded bark. The flames rise slow and blue, licking at the stones arranged in a circle at the center. Those stones aren't just boundaries, they are heat batteries. Throughout the night, they store thermal energy from the fire. Even now, long after the flames have died, you can still feel warmth radiating from them. In the deep winter, families would bury these stones in the earth floor, creating a primitive form of radiant heating. It kept the ground dry and prevented frost from creeping upward. When you walk across that surface barefoot, it's surprisingly comfortable, as though the soil remembers yesterday's fire. As the smoke thickens, you reach for the vent cords, the reins of the breathing house. 2 leather thongs dangle from the apex, tied to opposing flaps near the smoke hole. You pull one slightly, widening the downwind side. Instantly, the smoke straightens into a clean column drawn upward by the draft. This is the tipi's respiration, air drawn in from the ground edge, heated by the fire, rising and escaping through the vent. A constant circulation of oxygen keeps both the flame and the family alive. The whole system functions like the lungs of a sleeping giant, exhaling warmth, inhaling survival. A child stirs beside the fire and coughs softly. You watch as the mother adjusts a hide door flap, just a hand's width. That movement seems trivial, but it's a precise act of engineering. The doorway isn't just an exit. It's the intake vent for the tipi's airflow system. The small gap at the base allows fresh oxygen to enter, fueling both fire and lungs. Without that intake, the flame would suffocate, and carbon monoxide would gather invisibly. Long before scientists gave names to gases, these families understood them intuitively. They could read a room's breath as easily as its temperature. Outside, the wind picks up again, but the tipi only hums softly, never screams. That's because the hides are pinned at overlapping seams that flutter instead of tearing. The outer edges are staked with pegs carved from willow, flexible enough to move but strong enough to hold. Each stake is placed at a shallow angle, so if the wind pulls too hard, it bends instead of snapping. You see now that this entire house is built on the same principle as survival itself: bend, don't break. You sit near the fire and study the hides from the inside. The inner surface glows golden in the firelight, and you notice faint marks, stitches, smoke stains, repairs. Every scar tells a story. Some hides are darker where they've been smoked longer, better cured for waterproofing. Others show faint outlines of handprints, remnants of the tanning process where brains and fat were rubbed into the skin to make it supple. The smell that lingers in the air, a mix of hide, ash, and sage, isn't unpleasant. It's the scent of insulation. Buffalo hides, treated properly, can resist moisture while remaining breathable. When frozen, they become stiff and airtight. When warmed, they loosen just enough to vent steam. The tipi adapts to the weather without a single moving part beyond its flaps. A small basket near the wall holds dried grass. You realize it's insulation material, stuffed into seams during winter to block drafts. Every day the family checks those seams, pressing in more grass if they feel a chill. This habit becomes muscle memory. Even a child knows where to press a hand and feel for leaks. Maintenance isn't a chore here. It's survival. Neglect a seam, and frost creeps in before dawn. Fix it early, and the night passes in quiet warmth. You notice a pattern burned into the pole nearest the fire, blackened circles evenly spaced. These are smoke markers, reminders of how high flames are allowed to rise. The black zone means danger. Too much heat risks drying and cracking the hides, turning them brittle. Beneath that, a faint white layer of ash marks where stones once rested, showing how heat has cycled here for seasons uncounted. Everything inside the tipi bears witness to balance between air and fire, heat and smoke, death and rest. When you step outside again briefly, you feel the shock of cold bite through your fur coat. The tipi behind you stands dark against the snow, smoke drifting upward in a silver ribbon that glows in the moonlight. You can see how the structure's conical shape sheds wind perfectly. The snow piles high around its base, forming a natural insulation berm. Even nature contributes to the system, sealing the edge like mortar. The warmth inside can't escape easily, and the cold outside can't quite break in. It's an alliance between the elements themselves: earth, air, fire, and hide. You duck back through the flap, closing it tightly behind you. Instantly, the air softens again, the fire whispering in relief. You realize that what you've built here isn't just a house. It's an equation, a collaboration between instinct and environment, tested across centuries of trial. Every generation added one improvement: a steeper slope for high winds, thicker hides for Arctic cold, double-layered flaps for wet snow. The tipi is not primitive, it's perfected. Every breath you take inside it is proof of that perfection. As the morning grows brighter through the frost-coated hides, you watch thin beams of light filter in, pale and golden. They strike the smoke, creating shafts that shimmer like liquid amber. You could almost believe the house is alive, glowing from within, sighing in time with its occupants. It feels sacred, not in the sense of ritual, but in the simple, profound logic of endurance. You lie back near the fire, listening to the steady crackle, the gentle exhale through the vent, the muted howl of the storm outside. For the first time, the cold feels far away. You understand the tipi now, not as a tool but as a conversation, a perfect compromise between human will and the endless winter. The fire has found its rhythm again, a slow, deliberate pulse of warmth that moves through the tipi like breath through lungs. You crouch beside it, adding one more split log and watching as the coals flare and settle, red deepening to orange fading to gold. It's not just fire anymore, it's infrastructure. Every spark, every layer of ash, every stone in the hearth is part of an ancient blueprint designed for one purpose: to turn the impossible cold into a tolerable night. You begin to understand that the tipi is not just a tent, it is a thermal machine, one built without metal, without tools, without written plans, and yet it achieves what modern heating systems struggle to replicate: efficient, balanced, radiant warmth. At the heart of the tipi lies the most fundamental principle of heat engineering: the hearth as the engine. The stones that form the fire ring are chosen with intention. Not all rocks can handle this job. Some shatter when heated, sending shards across the floor. Others absorb heat too slowly or too fast. The people here learned through centuries of trial that certain river stones and dense granites are best. They hold heat long after the flames fade, releasing it in slow, steady pulses. You see now that this was the first radiant heating system. The stones beneath your hands warm the ground, the air, even the hides themselves. When you shift your weight, the warmth seems to cling to you, as if the floor remembers your body. The fire's location is precise too. It sits dead center, equidistant from every wall. This symmetry is not aesthetic. It's thermal geometry. Heat radiates evenly in all directions, ensuring no one corner grows too cold or too smoky. The small vent gap around the base of the tipi feeds oxygen directly toward the flame, and the rising heat creates a convection current that carries warmth upward, spreading it gently outward before it settles near the ground again. You can actually feel the current if you hold your hand in the right place. Warm air lifting, cool air sliding down the walls to replace it. The entire structure acts like a natural circulator, a loop of energy powered by nothing but physics and instinct. The hides that enclose this system are just as carefully engineered. You study the seams now, overlapping panels of buffalo hide stitched with sinew, their edges sealed with strips of rawhide that shrink tight in the cold, becoming watertight barriers. Each panel has been smoked over a low fire for hours, the process curing the leather and filling it with natural oils that repel moisture. When snow lands on the outside, it doesn't melt and soak in. It stays frozen, acting as an additional insulation layer, a shell of cold protecting the warmth within. Paradoxically, the colder it gets outside, the better the insulation works. The tipi takes winter's assault and turns it into armor. You trace the slope of the walls with your eyes. They rise steeply from the ground, narrowing toward the crown. That steep angle serves a purpose: to reduce surface area exposure to the wind and to force heat back toward the center. You can watch it happen. The smoke curls upward, slows near the tip, and escapes through the vent while the heavier, warmer air slides down the hides like invisible water. It pools near the ground where the family sleeps. In a strange way, the tipi turns the laws of thermodynamics into comfort, a space where every breath of heat finds its way home. The people who designed this system didn't think in terms of science, at least not in the modern sense. Their science was survival, tested by generations who either mastered the cold or vanished in it. The construction techniques evolved slowly, refined through each storm and season. You imagine a mother showing her daughter where to place the poles so the smoke won't blow back inside, or a grandfather explaining how to space the firestones so the draft stays gentle. Knowledge wasn't written, it was performed, lived, repeated. The tipi itself was the textbook, the family its library, each night's fire a new lesson in engineering and patience. As you move closer to the hides, you notice how the floor has been prepared. It's not bare earth. The ground here has been carved slightly into a shallow basin, a few inches lower at the center where the fire sits. Around it, the sleeping area is built on a raised platform of dried grass, branches, and layered hides. That elevation matters. Heat rises, yes, but it also settles low in the air. By sleeping just above the cold ground, the family keeps themselves within the band of warm air that circulates closest to the fire. Beneath the sleeping layers, the grass and reeds act as insulation, blocking ground frost from creeping upward. It's primitive thermal zoning, a home divided by invisible layers of temperature. You notice now that the hides near the floor are darker, stained from years of smoke and condensation. That lower ring of material often stays slightly damp, but instead of being a flaw, it's part of the system. Moisture helps seal the bottom edge, preventing drafts from sneaking under the walls. The upper hides, meanwhile, stay drier and more flexible, flexing slightly in the wind. The entire wall is a gradient of material, heavier, thicker and denser near the ground, thinner and lighter near the top. Every inch of that gradient manages temperature in its own way. The fire burns lower now, its rhythm steady. You can hear the faint crackle of sap inside the wood, the whisper of smoke pulling through the vent. The air smells faintly of pine resin and animal fat, the residues of generations of cooking, tanning and smoking that have coated the hides over time. Even that layer of soot is insulation. The black carbon on the walls absorbs heat and radiates it back into the space, creating a microclimate of warmth that modern infrared sensors would admire. You realize that every detail here, even the dirt, even the stains, serves the same purpose: efficiency through endurance. When you glance up, you see frost glittering around the vent opening, a ring of ice that sparkles in the firelight. It forms each night, melting slightly in the day, refreezing at dusk. The people living here monitor that frost as a kind of barometer. If the ring grows thick too quickly, it means the vent is too narrow, the smoke too moist, the air too still. Adjusting it keeps the internal balance. You tug one of the vent cords slightly, feeling the shift in airflow. The smoke straightens again, and the frost begins to glisten, melting just enough to drip and hiss when it hits the coals. It's not decoration, it's communication. The house is always talking. You just have to learn its language. By now, the others are stirring. A grandmother reaches for a small pouch of crushed herbs, sage, cedar, sweetgrass, and tosses a pinch into the fire. The scent rises instantly, cleansing, medicinal. But even this act has a thermal logic. The herbs smolder slowly, adding warmth without flame. Their smoke clings to the hides, discouraging insects in summer and sealing micro cracks in winter. The spiritual and the practical are not separate worlds here. They are the same fire seen from two sides. Later, as you step outside into the blinding white of morning, you see the village, a constellation of Tipis across the snow-covered plain. Smoke curls from each one in thin grey lines that merge into the sky. Each structure is aligned in roughly the same direction, their doorways facing east toward the rising sun. This alignment, too, is part of the design. The eastward entrance captures the first warmth of daylight, and the slant of morning light helps dry condensation from the hides. You realize that these homes are not isolated inventions, but part of a living, breathing ecosystem of architecture that stretches across nations and centuries. The materials change: elk hide for one tribe, buffalo for another, willow poles in the south, spruce in the north, but the logic remains the same. The tipi is adaptable, modular, aerodynamic. It is humanity's most efficient answer to cold and wind, and it was perfected long before science tried to measure why. You look back at your own tipi now, glowing gold against the snow. The smoke rises slow and steady, a thin column of life in a world that would rather erase it. Inside, heat gathers in invisible spirals, held and released by hide, ash, and memory. The cold presses close but never wins. You realize that this architecture is not about comfort, it's about endurance. It's not built to make you forget the winter, it's built to let you live through it with dignity. As the wind curls past, you duck back through the door, feeling the warmth close around you again like a heartbeat. The coals shimmer red, the hides sigh softly, and the world outside fades to silence. The tipi breathes. You breathe, and somewhere between those breaths, the cold forgets your name. The night has fallen again, and the cold has returned with the quiet confidence of a thing that never really left. Outside, the plains shimmer under a hard blue moon, and the air is so sharp it sounds like glass when the wind cuts across the snow. But inside the tipi, the fire burns low and sure. Its orange light washes over faces that have seen this season 1,000 times. Every ember glows like an old story, and in this world, stories are as necessary as warmth. You realize now that the true heart of the tipi is not the structure, nor the hides, nor even the fire itself. It is the people who keep that fire alive. They are the firekeepers, the engineers of heat, memory, and endurance. The firekeeper's duty is sacred. It begins long before the flames are born and continues long after they die. You watch as the eldest man in the family, his braids streaked white with frost, crouches beside the coals. He moves with deliberate calm, never rushing, never wasting energy. He stirs the ashes with a bone stick, exposing the glowing heart beneath. The sound it makes is soft, a kind of sigh. From a pouch tied at his waist, he pulls a handful of dried buffalo dung crushed into powder and mixed with bits of bark. It looks unassuming, but this is the secret fuel that made life possible on the plains. Wood was rare in this treeless world, but buffalo were not. Their dung, when dried under the sun, burns with steady heat and almost no smoke. It's not just a substitute, it's superior. It warms slowly, evenly, and keeps the air clear enough to breathe. You notice the precision with which he layers the fire. First the powder, then small twigs, then two thicker sticks set in a V like open hands. The coals catch easily, feeding the twigs feeding the wood. It's a choreography as old as language. Every member of the family knows the pattern, and every generation adds its own rhythm. When the fire grows, the heat rolls outward, touching the hides, the sleeping furs, the faces half buried in blankets. You feel it slide over your skin like breath, warm but never harsh. The tipi was designed for this kind of fire. Small, deliberate, intelligent. A modern fire would choke it to death in minutes. As the flame steadies, you can see the inner space come alive again. Shadows climb the poles, stretching and shrinking, as if the spirits carved into them are stirring. The hides glow amber. The frost near the ground melts into dark patches, and the smell of heat, dry, clean, almost metallic, fills the air. The firekeeper sits back on his heels and watches the flame, eyes reflecting it like twin mirrors. He is not simply keeping the family warm, he is maintaining the breath of the home. If the fire dies, so does the air. The smoke stops rising, the vent stops drawing, the moisture freezes, and soon everything turns to silence. He knows this in his bones. Every flicker of flame is an act of defiance against the cold that waits just beyond the hides. Beside him, a woman kneels and adds a small pot of snow to a stone bowl. It melts slowly from the radiant heat, steaming faintly. She drops dried berries into it, a handful of seeds and something that smells like pine. The mixture becomes thick, fragrant, alive with color. This isn't a meal so much as a ritual, restoring the fire's gift to the body. In a world this cold, food is not about taste, it's about heat transfer. Fats and starches burn inside you like coals, keeping your core temperature high. The tipi doesn't just protect the fire from the wind, it teaches you how to keep your own fire lit. You begin to notice patterns in how people move around the flame. There's an order, a rhythm. No one crosses between another person and the fire's center. To do so would block its warmth and its breath. The space immediately around the fire belongs to the keeper, but the warmth belongs to everyone. The children stay close enough to feel the heat on their faces, the adults slightly further back. The elders remain at the rear, near the vent cords where they can adjust airflow with practiced hands. The tipi becomes a miniature world, its rules as finely tuned as its architecture. You glance toward the top of the tipi and notice the way the smoke spirals upward, a slow twist of grey that merges into the dark above. The movement is hypnotic, but it's also science, the result of pressure differentials between the interior and the world outside. The fire heats the air, the warm air rises, and as it escapes, it draws in fresh oxygen from below. The elders know how to read that smoke. If it drifts too heavily to one side, it means the vent is off balance. If it scatters, the wind outside has shifted. You watch as a young woman stands and gives one of the leather vent cords a gentle pull. Instantly the smoke straightens, forming a perfect column again. This precision keeps the air clear and the temperature steady, turning an open fire inside a hide structure into a sustainable living system. The hides themselves begin to shimmer in the flickering light. You see patterns painted on them, rings, handprints, lines of ochre and black. They're not just decorations, they're insulation maps, guides for repair. Each mark tells where new hides were added, where seams were reinforced, where the structure had once failed and was corrected. Generations recorded their maintenance this way, transforming the very skin of the home into a living document of survival. The tipi isn't rebuilt every year. It evolves. Each patch, each seam, each repair adds to its intelligence. The firekeeper leans forward and feeds the coals again, this time with something different. A flat piece of bone. It catches with a faint hiss and burns with steady brightness. The smell is sharp, faintly sweet. You realize that even bone, when dry and clean, can serve as fuel. Nothing in this environment is wasted. Everything that once lived becomes part of the chain that keeps the next life warm. This philosophy extends beyond the fire. The hides that make up the tipi came from the same herds that fed the people and clothed them. The poles came from trees chosen not by size but by spirit, trees that grew tall and straight in the north wind, their wood tempered by hardship. Nothing about this place is casual. Every resource is part of a balanced equation of survival. As the night deepens, you feel the atmosphere shift. The tipi is no longer just warm, it's alive. Every breath, every crackle, every tiny movement becomes part of its rhythm. The people inside are synchronized with it, their actions tuned to its needs. You understand now why outsiders often misread this world. They saw only a tent, not realizing they were looking at one of the most refined thermal environments ever built. Here, temperature, airflow, and structure merge into something far more elegant than machinery, something alive and adaptive like skin. The elder hums softly as he watches the fire, a low melody that seems to vibrate with the crackling wood. The sound blends with the wind outside, the whisper of smoke through the vent, the soft rustle of hides. The entire space feels suspended, a capsule of heat floating in the endless cold. You close your eyes and breathe deeply. The air smells faintly of wood, sage, and iron. You can feel the warmth radiating through your chest. It is not comfort, it is communion. Outside, the storm gathers strength, snow swirling in ghostly spirals that vanish into the dark. The tipis of the camp stand motionless, their hides glowing faintly from within like lanterns. Each one shelters a family, each one a miracle of human ingenuity and patience. The cold presses down, testing the seams, probing for weakness. But the fires inside hold steady, each one a small sun defying the void. You realize that survival here isn't about enduring the cold, it's about outsmarting it, turning every law of nature into an ally. The tipi doesn't fight the winter. It listens to it, then teaches you how to live inside its breath. Back inside, the elder finally lies down, pulling a fur across his chest. The coals burn low, glowing like a constellation of red stars. You settle back into your place, the hides above you whispering softly in the wind. For a moment, you understand what it means to be at the center of the storm, not untouched by it, but embraced by it, alive because of it. The tipi breathes, and so do you, in this world of snow and silence. That's enough. You wake again sometime deep into the night, unsure whether it is midnight or morning, not that it matters. In winter, time blurs here, stretched and folded by the rhythm of the fire. The tipi breathes softly around you, its hides flexing with the pulse of the wind outside. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf calls, not in hunger, but as if reminding you that you are still alive. The air glows faintly orange, and every shadow inside moves with the lazy confidence of something that has been doing this for thousands of years. Tonight you notice the arrangement of bodies around the fire. It's not random, it's ritual, an unspoken architecture of sleep designed for both warmth and survival. The fire at the center has been reduced to a small nest of coals, glowing deep red, their light pulsing against the walls. You can feel its warmth radiate in slow waves, just enough to keep the frost from reclaiming the air. The sleeping order inside the tipi is a map of both temperature and family structure, a living diagram of engineering and kinship. The youngest child sleeps closest to the fire, bundled in thick hides of wolf and buffalo. Beside the child lies the mother, her back curved protectively toward the flames, her body a living windbreak. Beyond her, the father rests with one arm thrown toward the fire pit, ready to reach for a stick or adjust the vent even half asleep. Beyond him, near the wall where the cold pools, the grandparents sleep beneath a mound of furs so thick it looks like snowdrift. Their breaths rise and fall slowly, perfectly in rhythm with the crackling coals. You realize that this is no random placement. It's a heat economy, designed through centuries of observation. The fire radiates heat outward in a sphere, strongest at its core and diminishing by degrees with distance. The center ring, the mother and infant, captures the highest warmth. The next ring, adults, absorbs the residual heat and deflects the cold descending from the walls. The outer ring, the elders, acts as insulation. It's not that they are neglected, but that their presence strengthens the whole. Every breath they exhale, every spark of body heat they give off, contributes to the equilibrium of the tipi. Here warmth is communal. No one survives alone. The bedding is layered like geological strata. Closest to the ground lies a thick bed of dry grass and cattail fibers, soft and insulating. Over that are sheets of cured hide, elk, deer, or moose, their grain polished smooth from years of use. Above those rest the furs, wolf, fox, buffalo. The layering is deliberate. Each level traps air, creating micro pockets of warmth that the body reheats with every exhale. The effect is astonishing. When you slip a hand between two layers, you feel heat that wasn't there a moment ago. It's as though the earth itself is breathing under you. Someone stirs near the edge of the firelight. A teenager, maybe 15 winters old, rising silently to tend the coals. There is no command, no spoken word. Everyone in the tipi knows when it's their turn. The youth takes a stick, presses it gently into the ash, and stirs until the embers flare again. Then, with the careful precision of someone trained since childhood, he places a thin slab of dried wood across the stones. The fire catches with a whisper, not a roar, and soon the air grows warm again. He crouches there for a long moment, watching the flames, then crawls back under his hide. The entire process takes less than 2 minutes, and not one person fully wakes. This is the rhythm of life here, rest punctuated by vigilance. The sleeping arrangements shift with the seasons. In summer, the family sleeps further apart, near the edges where the air can move freely. In winter, everyone contracts toward the center, the tipi itself shrinking with them in spirit and sound. You imagine the same pattern playing out across hundreds of camps. Families cocooned around firelight, bodies curled in shared warmth, hearts beating in synchrony. From above it would look like a constellation of embers across the frozen plains, each glowing circle a small universe of survival. Inside each, the same story unfolds. Warmth traded for trust, sleep traded for vigilance, one generation teaching the next how to outsmart the cold. The air grows thicker now, tinged with the sweet resinous scent of pine smoke. Condensation forms on the inner hides, beads of moisture glinting like tiny stars in the firelight. It's a natural cycle. Breath condenses, freezes, melts again with the dawn. The hides absorb what they can and vent the rest through the smoke hole. You can see the frost pattern on the walls, a delicate lace of crystals tracing the places where warmth meets cold. Even this frost has a function. It acts as insulation, sealing small gaps and keeping the air exchange steady. Nothing in the tipi happens without reason. When you listen closely, you can hear more than breathing. You hear the quiet groan of wood expanding, the rustle of furs shifting, the faint hiss of snow sliding down the outer walls. The tipi is alive in its own way, its movements subtle but constant. You feel it respond to every gust of wind outside, tightening, flexing, creaking. The poles are bound at the top in a cross that can shift slightly under pressure, redistributing strain. This elasticity is the reason the structure never cracks under snow load. The family inside may sleep, but the tipi never does. It's always listening, always adjusting, a living companion in the night. You shift slightly beneath your own hide blanket and feel the warmth trapped beneath it. The air between your skin and the fur is humid, alive. The moisture from your breath and body heat gathers there, but instead of cooling you, it condenses just enough to form a thin film of warmth, a barrier that seals in your body's energy. You understand now that this is the secret of survival. It's not about conquering the cold, but about learning to coexist with it. The tipi doesn't fight nature, it collaborates with it. Every drop of sweat, every flicker of firelight, every breath of air plays a role in maintaining the balance. The family's dog, a lean animal with a coat like smoke, lies near the entrance. It's not just a guard, its body heat forms part of the thermal gradient of the space. The door flap is the weakest point of insulation, where drafts slip in, so the dog's warmth acts as a buffer, softening the edge of the cold before it can spread inward. You can see its breath in the firelight, slow and steady, rising and falling in time with the families. Even the animals are part of the system, not owned, but integrated. Sometime before dawn, the grandmother stirs. Her movements are slow but sure. She lifts her head and listens. Not for danger, but for rhythm. The fire is still breathing. The hides rustle softly. The child near the center gives a faint sigh in sleep. She nods once to herself and closes her eyes again. That nod says everything. The fire is good, the air is right, the night will hold. Outside, the wind begins to die. You can sense the change before you hear it. The walls grow still, the howling fades, and the world seems to hold its breath. Inside, the temperature rises slightly, as if the tipi can finally rest now that the cold's assault has passed. The faintest hint of dawn creeps through the smoke hole, not light exactly, but the idea of light, pale and grey and hesitant. The family remains asleep, their warmth pooled together in the center like a secret the night couldn't steal. You realize that this choreography, this precise order of sleeping and waking, heating and cooling, is the real engineering marvel. It's not built from wood or stone or hide, but from behavior. The tipi works because the people inside it have become part of its system. They've learned to move, breathe and rest in ways that complement its design. No thermostat, no mechanical parts, just a perfect harmony of human instinct and environmental intelligence. You close your eyes again, feeling the warmth of shared breath, the faint vibration of the fire, the quiet song of survival that hums beneath it all. And for the first time, you understand what comfort truly means out here. Not luxury, not abundance, but balance. You sleep again, not because the cold has vanished, but because the tipi, the fire, and the family have agreed to hold it at bay, together, until morning. When dawn finally arrives, it does so reluctantly, a slow grey blush spreading through the frost-caked hides of the tipi, like light seeping through old paper. The fire has burned itself down to quiet embers, their glow muted but steady, and the air inside smells faintly of smoke, pine sap, and human warmth. You sit up slowly, brushing bits of dried grass from your hair, and feel the temperature difference immediately. The air just above your head bites cold. The air closer to your chest still carries the ghost of heat from the night. You've been sleeping inside an organism made of fur, wood, and breath, and even as the flames die, it continues to protect you. Now, in the soft quiet of morning, you start to notice the secrets, the hidden insulators that make this balance possible. The first is beneath you. You press your palm into the sleeping platform, and the layer of grass and cattail beneath your hide crackles faintly, still dry despite the condensation in the air. The secret is in the layering. The bottom layer made from cattail fluff, light and hollow, trapping pockets of air like primitive foam. Above that, bundles of dry sweetgrass woven into a mat. And finally, the animal hides stitched together to form a near-perfect vapor barrier. Each layer does something different. Cattail insulates from ground frost, sweetgrass breathes and absorbs moisture. Hides reflect heat back toward the sleepers. It's insulation by hierarchy, a principle that would one day guide architects and engineers who never realized that these designs were already perfected centuries before their theories had names. When you push back one of the hides to check the walls, you see a faint line of frost along the bottom edge, not a flaw but a feature. Overnight, the condensation from human breath freezes near the ground where it's coldest, creating a crystalline seal that locks out drafts. As the day warms slightly, that frost will melt, be absorbed by the grass at the base, and evaporate harmlessly through the vent at the top. It's an automatic humidity regulator, a natural rhythm of freeze and thaw that keeps the interior air stable. You can't help but marvel at how every discomfort here has been turned into an advantage. Even moisture, the eternal enemy of cold climates, has been domesticated and put to work. Someone stirs across the fire, an older woman, her hair bound in braids streaked with silver. She moves with the quiet certainty of someone who's done this every morning for half a century. She lifts one of the hides from the wall seam, feeling along its edge with her fingertips. You realize she's checking for drafts. Her touch is expert. She knows by texture alone where the air might be creeping in. When she finds a soft spot, she takes a handful of dried moss from a small woven basket and presses it into the seam. The moss compresses easily, its fibers locking into place like natural insulation foam. It's fragrant, slightly sweet, earthy, still carrying the memory of sunlight. She works her way around the tipi, adding moss wherever the hides have loosened. No nails, no glue, no tools, just knowledge and time. You join her, mimicking her motions, and she smiles faintly without looking up. She hands you a bundle of grass and gestures to the base of the door flap. You stuff it carefully into the gap where the flap meets the ground, sealing out the faint draft that creeps through with every gust of wind. When you step back, the difference is immediate. The air no longer stings at the ankles. The space feels contained again, not sealed like a house, but tuned like an instrument. Every seam hums at the right frequency now, every curve of the wall pulling its weight in the symphony of survival. As the light grows stronger, you begin to notice another layer of insulation, one that's alive. Hanging along the inner walls are cured animal hides, spare robes and bundles of fur arranged in overlapping rows. To the untrained eye, they look like clutter. To the family that lives here, they are insulation in motion. Each hanging piece traps air behind it, forming pockets of stillness that buffer the cold. If the temperature drops further, those same hides can be pulled down and used as blankets or door coverings. Nothing inside the tipi ever has one purpose. Everything is modular, fluid, interchangeable. The architecture here is not static. It breathes, it transforms. You crouch near the hearth and notice the stones surrounding it again. They're not just for containing the fire. During the night, those stones absorb and store heat. During the day, when the fire burns low, they release it slowly, keeping the ground warm. It's a principle modern engineers would call thermal mass. The stones are carefully chosen for density, heavy enough to hold heat, but not so brittle they'll crack when the fire grows hot. You touch one now, it's still faintly warm, the kind of warmth that feels alive, like the last pulse of an animal's body. Beneath those stones, the soil has been mixed with ash and sand to form a semi-insulating layer that prevents ground frost from creeping upward. Even the earth here is part of the system. The dog near the doorway lifts its head, ears twitching. You notice now that it's lying directly over a patch of flattened grass, the designated vent zone. Every tipper needs intake air, or the smoke will suffocate everyone inside. The space near the flap serves that purpose, but it's also the coldest spot in the structure. The dog instinctively sleeps there, not only to guard the entrance but to provide body heat that tempers the draft. You watch its breath fog the air, tiny plumes that curl and vanish before they reach the ceiling. Even this animal is woven into the logic of the home. The younger children wake soon after, their hair tousled, their faces pink with sleep. One of them crawls toward the wall and begins scraping a thin film of ice from the hides with a piece of bone. It's a daily task, clearing the frost before it builds too thick. The shavings fall to the floor and melt near the fire, adding humidity to the air. Too little moisture, and the hides will crack. Too much, and they'll mildew. The child's work, small and unremarkable, keeps the microclimate stable. The tipi may be made of hides and poles, but its maintenance is as intricate as any machine. You step outside briefly, and the contrast shocks you again. The cold hits your lungs like a blow, sharp and metallic. The snow beneath your boots creaks, that deep, dry sound that only happens below zero. The world is white in every direction, and the wind tastes like ice splinters. You look back at the camp, dozens of tipis, their smoke rising straight into the pale blue sky. The snow piled high against their sides creates natural insulation berms, sealing the bases like packed clay. You can see now how the camp itself is designed. Every tipis placed in a circle, doorways facing inward toward a communal space. The wind passes around the ring instead of through it, reducing drafts. Even the layout of the village is part of the insulation strategy. The warmth of many fires keeps the air between the tipis a few degrees higher than the wasteland beyond. It's a human-built microclimate, invisible yet unmistakable. When you return inside, the older woman is finishing her rounds. She tucks the moss pouch away and sits beside the fire, her hands extended toward the heat. You can see the years etched in her skin, lines like riverbeds filled with memory. You realize that this maintenance is not a chore but a conversation. Each morning she listens to the tipi, reading its sighs and murmurs, repairing its small wounds before they grow. The house is alive, and she is its caretaker, its translator. The fire is fed again, the smell of cedar and fat rising sweet and slow. The air warms and everyone begins to stir, stretching under the heavy hides. You feel the comfort of the moment, the ordinary miracle of survival repeated one more day. The world outside is still lethal, still waiting, but inside this circle of wood and hide, the balance holds. Every seam sealed, every hide layered, every life folded neatly into the structure's warmth. You look up at the smoke drifting through the vent and realize that even that is insulation of a kind, a moving barrier of warm air that keeps the cold from falling straight in. As the morning settles into routine, the mother grinding dried meat into powder for soup, the children wrapping furs for the day's journey, you find yourself thinking about how elegant this system really is. It's not mechanical but biological. It doesn't separate people from nature. It teaches them to join its rhythm. The tipi is more than a shelter. It's a memory of how humans once learned to make peace with the cold instead of declaring war on it. You breathe deeply, and the air is soft, smoky, and warm enough to forget that outside the wind still screams at -40 degrees. And for a brief, perfect moment, you realize the truth of it. Survival isn't just about resisting the cold. It's about mastering the art of cooperation between family and fire, between hide and air, between human ingenuity and the merciless winter that taught it to think. By midday, the wind begins to change. You can hear it before you see it, a slow building moan that rises across the plains like a voice of warning. The hides of the tipi rustle, and a few faint snowflakes drift in through the vent above. The old man stirs the fire again, leaning close enough that his breath disappears into the smoke, and you realize that what happens next, what has always happened, depends entirely on the delicate balance between smoke and air. You've learned that this balance isn't luck or magic, it's mastery. The first rule is that smoke is alive. It doesn't move randomly. It follows patterns as precise as the pulse of a heart. Watch it long enough, and you can read the day's weather, the strength of the wind, even the promise of a storm. Inside the tipi, smoke behaves like a living thread, rising from the center fire and twisting toward the vent. But its behavior depends on temperature, wind pressure, and the geometry of the vent flaps above. A system so refined that the people who lived in these homes could adjust airflow to a level of precision that would impress any engineer. The vent poles are not decorations. They are control levers, the lungs of the house. You reach upward and tug one of the ropes, watching as the vent flaps respond. The smoke changes instantly, straightening like a disciplined soldier. A second adjustment and it begins to curl again, softer, slower. You feel the air shift, colder near your ankles, warmer near your face. The tipi breathes through these movements. When the air outside presses hard, as it does in a blizzard, the vents close slightly to keep the draft controlled. When the day grows still, the flaps open wider, allowing heat to escape before it smothers the people inside. This dynamic breathing is what makes the structure self-regulating. It's not just a shelter. It's a climate machine built entirely from instinct and experience. The hides of the tipi are angled just right to guide the smoke upward, but not in a straight line. The curve of the walls and the central height create a natural vortex, a soft spiral that spins the air before it exits. The effect is twofold. It pulls fresh oxygen in from the ground and prevents smoke from gathering too heavily at the top. Modern fluid dynamics experts have recreated this phenomenon in wind tunnels, proving what the ancestors already knew, that the tipi is an aerodynamic masterpiece. You can see it now in the way the smoke twists gracefully upward, leaving the lower space clear and breathable. The fire itself burns differently here. It's never a roaring inferno, but a disciplined, quiet flame. The fuel, buffalo dung, dry twigs, split logs, is chosen not for its heat output, but for its smoke profile. Too much flame and the air becomes dry, too little, and moisture takes over. The balance between combustion and humidity keeps the hides supple and the air clean. The women of the tipi often add aromatic herbs or dried sage to the coals, both to purify the air and to regulate the fire's burn rate. The smoke smells sweet and sacred, curling in thin ribbons that catch the light like silk threads. It isn't just the byproduct of fire, it's a living presence, carrying stories, prayers, and warmth. Sometimes, when the wind shifts, smoke slips down toward the sleeping areas. When that happens, no one panics. The fix is instinctive. A quick pull on the vent cords, a few pokes to the coals, a measured lift of the door flap to create a temporary draft. The smoke clears within seconds. The old man says nothing, just nods once in approval. Everyone here knows how to read the language of smoke. They grew up with it, learned it before they could walk. In a world this cold, reading air correctly is as vital as knowing how to breathe. The fire burns clean now, the smoke a faint mist in the upper air. You watch it mingle with sunlight filtering through the vent, creating a shaft of golden haze. Dust motes drift lazily inside it, each one glimmering for a heartbeat before vanishing. You realize that you are watching a kind of miracle, an invisible conversation between earth, fire, water, and air, perfectly balanced. You think about how many modern homes rely on machines to regulate this balance. Thermostats, vents, filters, fans, and yet somehow achieve less harmony than this single circle of hides and poles. You remember what the elder told you the night before. The tipi breathes with us, and we breathe with it. He wasn't speaking poetically. The exchange of air between inside and outside truly mirrors the rhythm of human lungs. Every gust that enters through the base feeds the fire. Every plume that escapes through the top releases what's no longer needed. The result is continuous renewal. The smoke doesn't suffocate, it circulates. The people inside don't choke on it, they absorb its lessons. Over time, the smell of smoke becomes inseparable from the idea of home. There is another layer to this, one that modern science would call smoke-proofing, but which was discovered here through experience. The upper hides of the tipi are treated with animal fat and resin, which makes them resistant to heat and moisture. This thin, oily coating darkens over years of use, gradually turning the inner surface of the tipi a deep, smoky brown. That color isn't just patina, it's insulation. The carbon from generations of fires absorbs and radiates heat like black iron. What others might see as dirt is, in truth, energy storage. The walls themselves become radiant panels, reflecting warmth back into the living space long after the fire has cooled. You step closer to the hearth and notice the shape of the flames, narrow and tall, like a candle's spine. They seem almost disciplined, rising straight instead of sprawling outward. That's because the stones and wood have been arranged to create a narrow chimney effect. The small opening at the top of the cone maintains a constant draw, while the insulated walls minimize turbulence. The fire burns hotter and cleaner this way, producing less soot and more consistent warmth. You can almost feel the structure hum with balance, like a finely tuned instrument. The wind outside grows louder, rattling the hides. Snow begins to drift against the base, piling in thick waves that bury the lower edge. The effect inside is immediate. The temperature rises slightly. The snow acts as a natural windbreak, sealing the tipi even tighter. You realize now that nature itself becomes part of the insulation system. The colder it gets, the better the home performs. The structure thrives on adversity. When the storm reaches its peak, you can barely hear the fire crackle, the hides whip and strain, the poles creak, but the balance holds. You sit in the golden warmth and listen to the steady hum of survival. The smoke continues its gentle climb, finding its way through the vent like a spirit refusing to be trapped. The air stays breathable, the fire steady, the people calm. It's a performance repeated countless times across countless winters, and every participant, the wood, the hide, the air, the human breath, knows its role by heart. As evening falls, the storm passes as quickly as it came. The wind subsides and the night returns to its eerie stillness. The air smells different now, sharper, cleaner, laced with the scent of ozone and pine. The elder reaches for a pouch of dried herbs and sprinkles them into the embers. The smoke rises thick for a moment, then fades into a thin, pale ribbon that slips through the vent and disappears into the stars. He closes his eyes and murmurs a few words. You don't quite understand. Maybe it's prayer. Maybe it's gratitude. Maybe it's both. You look up at the dark ceiling where the smoke hole glows faintly with starlight. The cold sky above is endless and merciless. But here inside there is warmth, not only in the fire, but in the wisdom that shaped it. You realize that this isn't just engineering, it's philosophy. A tipi is not built against the cold, it's built with it, designed to turn even suffering into balance. The fire doesn't fight the wind, it uses it. The smoke doesn't flee the cold, it carries warmth upward. The people inside don't fear the elements. They live within their logic, and in doing so, they master it. The elder finally opens his eyes and stirs the coals one last time before sleep. The smoke rises perfectly straight. The vent gleams with faint frost, and for a moment the entire world feels suspended between two breaths, one from the fire, one from the stars. The tipi breathes again, slow and steady, its lungs full of life. And you, sitting within its warmth, breathe with it, your chest rising and falling in the same rhythm that has kept families alive here for 10,000 winters. Night returns like a thick curtain, swallowing the last trace of blue from the sky. The wind has gone quiet now, the air holding still as if the world itself has paused to take a breath. Inside the tipi, the fire burns low and deliberate, its light amber and patient, its sound a soft whispering murmur against the walls. The rest of the family sleeps, curled under furs and layered hides, their bodies forming that familiar circular rhythm around the hearth, the breathing constellation of warmth and life. But one person remains awake, the firekeeper. Every tipi has one. not a title, but a responsibility, one that shifts from night to night. Tonight it belongs to the young man, the eldest son, maybe 16 or 17 winters old. He sits cross-legged near the hearth, wrapped in a robe of buffalo hide, his hair faintly glinting in the firelight. The air around him carries the weight of ceremony. This isn't just about keeping the flame alive. It's about keeping the heartbeat of the home steady through the darkest hours. You watch him work and you begin to understand that tending fire in the deep winter night isn't a chore, it's a dialogue with the elements. The firekeeper moves slowly, never rushing, never wasting movement. He holds a stick in one hand, pushing and adjusting coals with a patience that feels almost meditative. Every few minutes he reaches to the side, where a small pile of split wood lies stacked like ribs, and selects a single piece, not too dry, not too damp. He places it onto the coals with care, angled just right to catch without smothering the existing heat. The fire accepts it quietly, exhaling a puff of smoke that drifts upward in a perfect spiral. He watches it for a long moment, reading its behavior, learning what it needs. Too much wood, and the air will thicken. Too little, and the cold will slip in like a thief. The firekeeper's task is balance, the same eternal balance that defines every moment of life in this frozen land. Outside, the cold sharpens. You can hear the faint groan of ice forming along the riverbank, the soft sigh of snow settling deeper against the tippy walls. Occasionally the poles creak, shifting ever so slightly as the hides tighten from the temperature drop. The young man glances upward each time, reading the sound like a sailor reads wind. He doesn't look worried. The tippy is holding firm, flexing the way it was meant to. Still, his eyes linger on the vent at the top, where a faint halo of moonlight seeps through. He adjusts the flap cords, narrowing the opening by a finger's width, ensuring the drawer stays steady. A small action, invisible to most, but to him it's survival. He leans back slightly, stretching his arms, and the firelight paints his face in amber and shadow. You can see the frost forming on his eyelashes, tiny crystals that catch the light like stars. The air near the ground is cool again. The heat from the fire rises unevenly, pooling around the shoulders. He pulls his robe tighter but doesn't complain. This cold is familiar. It teaches discipline. The warmth closest to the fire is earned through watchfulness, not privilege. You start to notice how the interior space changes as the night deepens. The smoke moves more lazily now, drifting low before lifting toward the vent. The walls seem to exhale warmth, their hides darkened with years of absorbed smoke and oil. The family sleeps soundly. A soft rustle here, a faint sigh there. Their breaths rise in visible plumes for an instant before vanishing into the air's warmth. The firekeeper looks at them occasionally, not sentimentally but protectively. He knows the rhythm of their breathing. He can tell when the fire is good simply by listening to how deeply his family sleeps. The sound of rest is his gauge, his silent feedback loop. Every hour or so he stirs the embers again, feeding them with thin slivers of fatwood that burn hot and clean. Each flame he coaxes back to life seems to carry the history of thousands before it. The same gestures repeated across generations, unchanged because they were perfect from the start. He moves like someone continuing an old song without needing to know the words. When he adds wood, he doesn't blow directly on the coals. Instead, he waves a flat piece of bark to fan the fire gently, knowing that too much breath will send sparks flying. You realize that everything in this small world, every motion, every decision, is dictated by experience passed through hands, not through speech. He glances at a small clay pot sitting beside the fire. It's filled with melted snow and a few pieces of dried pine. Every so often, he pours a little onto the stones, releasing a burst of fragrant steam. This hydrates the air and keeps the hides from drying out and cracking. It also produces that signature scent, smoke mixed with resin, warmth mixed with pine, the perfume of survival. The pot hisses softly, and the air grows heavy with comfort. It's a trick learned through centuries of watching the relationship between fire and air. Without this moisture, the lungs ache and the skin splits. Too much, and the warmth dies. Again, it's all balance, a living science of intuition. From time to time, the firekeeper adjusts the position of the hides that form the outer wall. The tipi is made to breathe, but in extreme cold, breath must be controlled. He checks the seams where they overlap, pressing moss or fur into tiny gaps. The family used dried buffalo sinew to lash the hides to the poles, and those bindings creak faintly now as they tighten in the cold. He tests them with a fingertip, then smiles faintly, strong as ever. His hands are raw, cracked, and scarred from countless nights like this. Yet there's pride in his stillness. He is part of the mechanism, as necessary as the vent or the stones or the hides themselves. Eventually he steps outside for a moment, pulling on his fur boots and ducking through the flap. The world beyond is white, limitless, and silent. The snow glows faintly in the moonlight, casting the landscape in silver and blue. The air is so cold that it bites the inside of your nose. The stars feel close enough to cut you. He looks around the camp, dozens of tipis in a ring, their chimneys of smoke rising into the night. From each, a faint orange pulse, like the beating of a great heart. He knows he's not alone in his vigil. Somewhere in each of those glowing circles, another firekeeper sits awake, guarding warmth against the infinite cold. Together they form an invisible network of endurance, each flame feeding the next through unseen solidarity. He squats and gathers a small armful of snow, packing it into a wooden bowl. Inside it will melt into clean water, another resource managed by rhythm, not convenience. Before he returns, he stands still for a moment, letting the wind whip around him. The tipi behind him glows faintly, smoke curling upward through the vent like breath rising to the heavens. He touches one of the outer poles, wood smooth and cold under his fingers, and whispers something low, maybe a prayer to the spirits of the fire or the ancestors who built this way long before he was born. When he steps back inside, the heat hits him instantly. The fire greets him with a hiss and crackle, and for a moment the sound feels almost like a voice. He kneels again, feeding it another thin piece of wood. The flames flare, painting the walls in trembling gold. The sleeping faces around him glow faintly in the light, peaceful, untroubled, secure. He looks at them and smiles, just barely. His job is thankless, invisible, but it is the reason they survive. The others will wake in the morning, stretch in warmth, and never know how cold the night truly was. That's how it should be. The best work leaves no trace but comfort. Hours pass like this, quiet, steady, endless. He doesn't grow bored. Boredom doesn't exist here. Only the flow between warmth and cold, vigilance and rest. When at last he feels his eyelids grow heavy, he nudges one of the younger children sleeping nearby. The boy opens his eyes without confusion, without complaint. He knows. He shifts closer to the fire, takes up the stick, and resumes the vigil seamlessly. The handoff is wordless, perfect. One generation to the next. The circle of care remains unbroken. You realize as you watch that this ritual is not just about tending flame, it's about memory. A nightly reenactment of humanity's oldest contract with the elements. The fire will protect you, but only if you respect it, feed it, watch over it. Every culture that survived cold learned this lesson. But here, inside this fragile, perfect cone of hides and wood, the lesson has been refined into art. The firekeeper's vigil is not a superstition. It is science and devotion intertwined. The boy stirs the coals again. Sparks leap upward, golden and brief, like tiny souls seeking escape before fading into darkness. The smoke rises steady and smooth, no thicker than breath. The tipi creaks softly but holds firm. Outside, the cold tightens its grip. Inside, the fire replies with quiet defiance. By the time dawn begins to grey the horizon, the old rhythm has completed another cycle. The world is still frozen, still vast, still deadly, but inside this single small circle of light, humanity has endured one more night. The boy looks up at the smoke hole where the first light of morning seeps through and smiles. He doesn't know it, but he's just carried forward a legacy that began when the first spark was ever struck against stone. The Tipi exhales softly, the hides sigh with warmth, and the fire purrs in gratitude. Balance has been kept. The night has been survived. Again. By mid-morning, the sun cuts across the frozen plain like a blade of dull gold. It's still bitterly cold outside, the kind of cold that steals your breath and stiffens leather. But inside the tipi, the world feels utterly different. The air carries a warmth that's soft and heavy, a mixture of smoke, breath, and the faint animal scent of hides cured with tallow. You can see the light filtering through the translucent skin of the walls, amber near the fire, milk pale near the ground. The tipi is awake again, alive, a living engine of survival. You look around and begin to see it not as a shelter but as a blueprint, a structure born from the mathematics of necessity and the philosophy of balance. Everything about its shape, its proportions, its materials is intentional. The cone isn't arbitrary. The steep angle of its slope, around 60 degrees, ensures that snow and rain slide off easily, preventing collapse. It also creates an internal airflow pattern, a convection spiral that regulates temperature naturally. The base of the tipi, wide and low, traps heavy cold air, while the upper cone channels hot air toward the vent. The result is a gradient that feels almost engineered. Near the floor, the temperature hovers just above freezing, enough to preserve food and gear. Waist high, it's comfortably warm. Around the fire, it's downright cozy, and yet no thermometer was ever used here. No ruler, no blueprint, only trial, memory, and 1,000 winters of observation. The poles themselves, long, straight pine or spruce trunks stripped of bark, are the bones of the whole design. Each one must be carefully chosen for uniform thickness and flexibility. Too green, and it will warp when the hides tighten from the heat. Too dry, and it will snap under strain. The builders knew this intuitively. They selected trees at specific times of year, often late spring when the sap runs high but the wood is still soft. The poles are leaned against each other in a tripod at first, then expanded outward in a spiral, each new pole resting against the last like the ribs of a living creature. When viewed from above, the pattern resembles a star, or as one elder once said, a memory of the sun planted on earth. Cheetahs bechained van twait. Once the frame is set, the hides are lifted into place. Massive buffalo skins, each one heavy as a person, stitched edge to edge with sinew thread. Every seam overlaps the next by a few inches, forming a continuous waterproof shell. The hides are tanned differently for this purpose. Not too soft, not too stiff, coated lightly with animal fat to repel water and snow. When the tipi is new, the hides glow pale cream in sunlight. Over the years they darken with smoke, becoming bronze, then mahogany, then nearly black. That darkening isn't decay, it's enhancement. The darker the surface, the better it absorbs and retains heat. What looks old to an outsider is, in truth, the pinnacle of efficiency. The door faces east. Always east. The first light of dawn spills in through the flap, illuminating the hearth and warming the air just enough to stir the sleepers. There's symbolism in that, of course. Light as renewal, warmth as promise, but there's also physics. Facing east means the tipi catches the morning sun but avoids the worst of the afternoon glare. It's a solar design centuries before such terms existed. The doorway itself is low and circular, forcing anyone who enters to bow slightly, not in submission but in respect, for the warmth, for the fire, for the life maintained within. Around the inner circumference of the tipi runs a liner, a second wall made of lighter hides or woven mats. This liner is crucial. It creates a channel of moving air between the inner and outer walls, allowing smoke to rise cleanly while trapping warmth below. The space between acts as a thermal buffer, just like double-glazed glass in a modern house. In severe cold, that liner is tucked tight to the floor, sealing in heat. In warmer weather, it's raised a few inches, inviting cool air to circulate. You can see it now, a clever, breathing architecture, self-adjusting and endlessly reusable. The floor itself is not bare earth. As some imagine, beneath the bedding and hides lies a layer of crushed bark, sand and ash from countless fires. This mixture serves as both insulation and sanitation, absorbing moisture, neutralizing odors, deterring insects. It's soft underfoot and never freezes solid. In the center, the hearth sits on a ring of stone, its position calculated precisely so that the rising smoke meets the vent at the ideal angle. Move it a few inches too far in any direction and the flow fails. Yet somehow, through generations of practice, these people could place it perfectly without ever measuring. The tipi builders were mathematicians without numbers, architects without blueprints. You reach out and touch one of the poles. The surface feels warm, dry, almost alive. Resin glistens faintly where the bark once was, hardened into amber beads that catch the light. Each pole bears tiny scars, marks from axes, grooves from years of binding. These imperfections aren't flaws. They're signatures of adaptation. When the wind outside howls, these poles bend just enough to absorb the force, distributing it across the structure. That flexibility is what allows the tipi to survive storms that would shred rigid buildings to splinters. Nature's engineering principle, resilience through movement, embodied perfectly in wood and hide. Even the smoke hole above is a triumph of design. The flaps can be angled using two long poles, pivoted from inside. When the wind shifts, the smoke keeper can rotate the opening so that it always draws correctly. The hides are cut in such a way that the flaps act as both vent and shield. In calm weather, both sides open wide to let smoke drift upward. In strong wind, one flap closes while the other catches the breeze, increasing suction like a chimney. The result is flawless air control, all achieved with nothing more than muscle, memory, and a few sticks. You begin to notice how the fire interacts with the architecture. The flames are small but precise, feeding heat upward in a perfect cone that mirrors the shape of the tipi itself. This symmetry is no coincidence. The builders understood instinctively that heat rises in a predictable pattern, and they built the structure to harmonize with that pattern. It's an unspoken physics lesson written in smoke and wood. The entire house is designed not to resist the elements but to move with them, to dance with air, to fold light into shadow, to breathe. In the far corner, above a line of hanging furs, you see small pouches made of hide tied to the poles. These hold herbs, resin, and dried grasses, the tipi's scent memory. When the air grows stale, a handful of these are thrown onto the fire, releasing fragrant oils that cleanse and refresh the space. Some are medicinal, juniper to purify, sage to protect, sweet grass to invite calm. The scent lingers long after the fire burns out, clinging to the walls and bedding. Even smell becomes a layer of warmth here, psychological insulation for the mind. The family moves around the space fluidly. No corners, no partitions, no wasted movement. Every action, eating, sleeping, repairing hides, storytelling, happens within the same circle. The architecture demands cooperation. The fire is everyone's center. When one person stokes it, all feel the warmth. When one person leaves the flap open, all feel the draft. The tipi teaches accountability through design. There are no rooms to hide in, no doors to shut. Survival itself is communal, and so is comfort. Later that day, as snow begins to fall again, you step outside and look back at the tipi from a distance. It stands low and graceful against the white horizon, its walls blending with the color of the land. The smoke rising from the vent twists lazily, its path visible for only a moment before dissolving into the grey sky. You realize that its beauty isn't ornamental, it's functional. Its form follows necessity so perfectly that it becomes art. The tipi isn't primitive. It's perfected. It's the distilled result of thousands of winters, each teaching one more lesson about how to live without walls, how to sleep through a world that wants you frozen, how to bend without breaking. You walk closer again, hearing the faint creak of poles, the muffled laughter inside, the rhythmic breathing of a family safe within. The cold still bites at your face, but the warmth radiating from that simple cone of hides feels almost holy. You think of cathedrals built centuries later, of architects praised for designing self-heating, self-cooling buildings, and you smile because you know it was already done here, under the open sky, long before blueprints and titles existed. If architecture is the art of shaping air, then this, the tipi, is the purest expression of it. The air inside is sculpted by flame, guided by hide, softened by breath. The walls breathe. The floor exhales. The smoke carries prayers upward. It is not a house, it is a heartbeat, one that has kept humans alive against odds so harsh they defy reason. You step back, and the tipi's silhouette merges with the winter landscape, part of it, not apart from it. And in that moment you understand what survival truly means here. Not defiance, harmony. By the time the season reaches its deepest cold, the snow no longer falls softly, it hisses. The air outside is so cold that each flake turns to crystal before it touches the ground, and when the wind blows, it sounds like sand dragging across glass. The world seems empty, stripped to its bones. The horizon disappears behind curtains of frozen air. But inside the tipi, the sound is different, softer, human, rhythmic. It is the sound of people breathing in unison, the low pop of firewood, the quiet sigh of hides flexing as they adjust to heat. It is not silence. It is survival made audible. You wake into this world of warmth, cocooned beneath layers of buffalo hide. The furs are heavy, almost immovable, but the weight is comforting. Every inch of your body feels the contrast between what lies beyond the walls and what lives inside them. When you lift your head, you can see your own breath shimmer faintly in the low light. It smells of smoke and leather, of sleep and life. The coals still glow in the hearth, red and steady, casting enough warmth to keep the air above freezing. Beside the fire, someone stirs, the morning watcher checking the embers before they fade. This is how every day begins here, with quiet stewardship. No words, no rush, only a simple, disciplined ritual of tending the world back to warmth. The first task is to coax flame from ember. The watcher bends close, hands forming a circle around the coals, feeding them thin curls of dry grass. Smoke rises lazily, caught in the glow of dawn seeping through the vent above. A single spark leaps upward, then another, and soon the fire stretches awake again, its light painting the walls in soft gold. The rest of the family begins to stir. You can hear small movements, the rustle of blankets, the creak of wood, the sighs of waking breath. A baby murmurs, then quiets as someone's hand finds its cheek. Morning in the tipi doesn't explode into activity. It unfolds like a slow thaw. The fire brightens and you can see the walls now, gleaming faintly with years of smoke. Each patch of hide tells a story, scars from storms, faint handprints from where snow was brushed away, the darker circle above the fire where heat and breath have met for decades. The tipi carries memory, not through words, but through texture. Every mark is a page in a history written by weather and hands. Breakfast is a small ceremony in itself. There is no table, no separation of tasks. Dried meat and rendered fat are pulled from leather bags kept near the coldest edge of the floor. The women place flat stones near the fire to warm, laying thin slices of meat on them until they sizzle faintly. The smell fills the space, rich, smoky, familiar. Children blink awake, faces flushed pink from sleep, their hair full of static from the furs. They reach for warmth first, not food, hands extended to the flames, palms open like flowers seeking sun. The first bites are always quiet, respectful. Outside, the day is still cruel. Inside, the rhythm of life begins again. You notice how the family's movements follow invisible patterns. The eldest feeds the fire. The mother adjusts the hides by the vent. The children fold bedding away from the hearth, shaking out frost that drifted in during the night. Each person has a role. Each role supports the others. It's not command, it's harmony. The circle principle made real. The tipi itself enforces this equality. There are no corners for hierarchy, no upper floors for privilege. The circle is democracy, architecture turned philosophy. You cannot hide from the group, and the group cannot abandon you. When one breathes, all breathe. When one sleeps, all sleep. When one fire burns, it warms the many. Later, the men prepare to leave for hunting, layering hides over their shoulders, tying snowshoes of willow and rawhide to their feet. You watch them check their weapons, stone-tipped spears, bows wrapped in sinew, blades carved from bone polished to shine. Each motion is deliberate, quiet. They are not conquering the wilderness. They are negotiating with it. The tipi door opens, and the cold rushes in, sudden, brutal, breathtaking. For an instant, every breath freezes in midair, forming a halo around the doorway. The men step out into the white and vanish like ghosts. The flap falls back, the sound of wind fades, and the calm resumes. Inside, the air grows heavy again. The women sit near the fire, repairing clothing, scraping hides, braiding cordage from sinew. Their movements are hypnotic, repetition that becomes meditation. Every scrape and stitch has a rhythm, syncing with the crackle of the fire. You can hear an old woman humming softly, the tune ancient and without language, maybe a song her grandmother once sang in another tipi, under another winter sky. The sound seems to settle into the hides themselves, embedding music into architecture. The tipi isn't just a shelter, it's an instrument resonating with human life. As the day drifts into afternoon, the air outside begins to shift. A storm approaches, not the gentle snow you've seen before, but the kind that erases everything. You can feel it before you hear it. A change in pressure, a tightening in your chest. The family moves quickly, closing vents, adding snow to the outer edges for insulation, pulling extra hides across the lower walls. The fire burns higher now, more assertive, but it's carefully controlled. The smoke rises straight, then bends slightly, seeking its exit like a living thing. The storm hits in waves, wind first, then snow, then sound. The tipi bends and moans, but it holds. The structure doesn't fight the wind. It dances with it, swaying in rhythm, giving just enough to survive. The family huddles closer, forming a single warm mass of bodies around the fire. In this space, where breath mingles with smoke, warmth isn't just physical, it's emotional, it's ancestral, it's faith made tangible. You think about how many generations endured storms like this, countless winters, endless nights, and realize that what has kept them alive isn't brute strength or luck. It's design. It's intelligence disguised as simplicity. The tipi, the circle, the fire, the roles, all part of an ecosystem engineered for both survival and peace. This architecture doesn't resist nature. It harmonizes with it. Each gust of wind, each drift of snow, each ember that rises through the smoke hole, all are accounted for. It's a kind of wisdom that modern systems forgot, mistaking control for mastery. The tipi never controls, it cooperates. When the storm finally weakens, you step outside again, blinking against the glare. The sky has cleared to a pale, icy blue, and the air feels sharp enough to slice skin. Around you, the camp is half buried, a city of snow-draped cones glowing faintly with the fires within. Smoke rises straight now, no longer bent by wind, each column a thread stitching earth and sky together. You can smell pine and ash and the faint sweetness of thawing air. The world is still frozen but alive again. And for the first time you understand what the tipi really is. Not just a building, not even just a home. It's a heartbeat frozen in wood and hide, a machine of breath that turns cold into life. The elders say that when the world ends and returns to ice, it will be the ones who remember the tipi who survive again. Not because of the hides or the fire, but because of what those things represent: adaptation, patience, humility before the elements. You feel that truth in your bones now. The tipi teaches not how to escape the cold, but how to exist within it, to sleep through it, to breathe with it, to see warmth not as a privilege but as a partnership. In its circle lies the oldest lesson of all. Balance is the only true shelter. The fire behind you cracks once, releasing a small puff of smoke that curls into the air like a departing spirit. You look back one last time. Inside, the family is laughing softly, the baby clapping at sparks that drift upward like glowing snowflakes. The hides ripple faintly in the light breeze, creaking like old leather. The snow outside glitters blue and gold, and you realize that this small circle of heat, breath, and wood has outlasted empires, machines, and time itself. The tipi remains, the design endures, the warmth continues. You exhale, watching your breath join the smoke as it rises through the vent and disappears into the frozen sky. It carries the same story upward, one of endurance, intelligence, and unbroken circles. Somewhere in that endless blue, the ancestors are still watching the flames they built continue to burn. The storm has passed. The night, once sharp and merciless, now feels soft around the edges, a quiet surrender after hours of defiance. The snow outside glows faintly blue in the light of a waning moon, and through the smoke hole above, stars return one by one, glittering like old memories. Inside the tipi, the fire is no longer fierce. It hums low and steady, its coals pulsing like a heartbeat half asleep. The air tastes of wood and life, of 1,000 nights survived by the same simple rhythm. Breathe, feed the flame, rest, repeat. You lie back against the bedding, feeling the weight of the hides pressed gently against you. They're warm, almost breathing on their own, carrying the scent of smoke, tallow, and faint traces of cedar. Outside, the wind still whispers through the poles, but it's gentle now, a tired voice softened by distance. Somewhere near the door, a dog sighs in its sleep. Someone shifts under the blankets, murmuring in a language older than the walls themselves. And for a moment, everything in the world feels balanced. Not conquered, not endured, just perfectly aligned. You stare upward at the faint shimmer of the smoke hole. The stars beyond it seem impossibly far, yet the path between you and them is marked by smoke, a bridge of breath connecting earth to sky. It's the same bridge that carried warmth through every frozen century, the same idea that built shelter from bone and hide, the same instinct that whispered survive but do it beautifully. Your eyes grow heavy, the fire's glow blurring into a haze of gold and red. The air thickens, wrapping you in quiet. You can feel the heartbeat of the earth beneath the floor, slow and ancient. You can hear the breathing of the tipi, the soft inhale of the vent, the low exhale of the coals. The rhythm pulls you under gently, the way snow covers sound, the way sleep covers thought. And as your mind drifts, you realize the lesson was never just about the cold. It was about listening, to wood, to wind, to each other, to the silence that keeps you alive. The last ember flares once more, glowing like a small sun, then fades into ash. The night exhales. The world holds still. And like a candle going out, it all settles into peace.